All right, let's dive into the introduction and core premise of Wings of Desire, a film that's truly something special and worth talking about in detail. So, Wings of Desire came out in 1987. It's a German film directed by Wim Wenders, who's known for making movies that are thoughtful, poetic, and visually stunning. If you haven't heard of him, he's the guy behind some really famous films like Paris, Texas, which also deals with deep human emotions and a unique way of storytelling. The movie's genre is a mix of fantasy and drama, but it's not your typical fantasy with dragons or magic battles. Instead, it's more of a quiet, reflective story that uses fantasy elements to explore big ideas like love, loneliness, and what it means to be human. The core premise of Wings of Desire is pretty fascinating. The story revolves around invisible, immortal angels who silently watch over the people of Berlin. These angels can hear the thoughts of humans and feel their emotions, but they can't interact with them directly. The film mainly follows one angel named Damiel, played by Bruno Ganz, who becomes fascinated by the lives and feelings of the people he observes. He starts to desire experiencing human life firsthand, with all its pain and joy, which is a pretty big deal for a celestial being who has lived forever without feeling anything physical or emotional in the same way humans do. This basic setup might sound simple, but the movie uses it to dive deep into what makes life worth living and what it means to truly connect with others. Talking about the cast, besides Bruno Ganz, who really gives a heartfelt and captivating performance as Damiel, you have Solveig da Martin playing Barian, a lonely trapeze artist who becomes the object of Damiel's affection. Their relationship forms the emotional core of the film without ever feeling forced or rushed. There's also Otto Sander, who plays another angel, Cassel, offering a more reserved contrast to Damiel's curiosity and longing. It's not a film that relies heavily on action or plot twists, but rather on the quiet moments, the characters' inner lives, and the atmosphere created by the performances. Wenders' direction deserves a special mention here, because it's his vision that makes this movie stand out. The film was shot in both black and white and color, which isn't just a stylistic choice. It actually helps tell the story on a deeper level. The black and white scenes represent the angel's world, detached, timeless, and unemotional. When the film switches to color, it signals the human world, full of vibrancy, imperfections, and feelings. This shift really pulls you into the experience and helps you understand the contrast between living as an immortal observer and living as a mortal human being. It's a clever way of showing the divide between these two existences without saying a word. What makes Wings of Desire even more interesting is how it doesn't rush you through its story. Instead, it invites you to slow down and really listen. Listen to the voices of the characters, to the city around them, and to the thoughts and feelings floating in the air. The film spends a lot of time on monologues and voiceovers that reveal what the characters are thinking, which might seem unusual at first, but it's actually what gives the movie its unique charm. You almost feel like you're inside the mind of Damiel or the people he watches, understanding their hopes, regrets, and desires. It's almost poetic, and it can really make you stop and think about your own life, your own connections with people, and what it means to be truly present. Now, without giving away any spoilers, the story doesn't have a traditional plot with big conflicts or dramatic twists. Instead, it's more about Damiel's internal journey and his decision to step out of his angelic existence into the messy, beautiful, painful world of humans. That choice raises questions that are at the heart of the movie. Is it better to be a detached observer or to dive headfirst into life with all the risk and reward that comes with it? What does it really mean to be alive? These questions stick with you long after the movie ends, which is probably why so many people keep coming back to it, even decades later. In terms of what this analysis will cover, I want to take a deep look at the different layers of the film. First, we'll talk about the technical aspects, like the cinematography and the unique way Wenders uses color and black and white to tell the story visually. Then, we'll get into the narrative structure, how the story unfolds without a traditional plot, and how the characters' inner lives are presented. Finally, we'll explore the themes, which are what really make this movie memorable. We'll dive into ideas about loneliness, connection, the search for meaning, and the contrast between the spiritual and the physical worlds. Plus, I'll point out some standout scenes and lines that really stick with you, like when Daniel says, "I want to touch people. I want to be like them." It's a simple line, but it carries so much weight. Also, fun fact, the movie takes place in Berlin just before the fall of the Berlin Wall, and while it doesn't directly address politics, the setting adds an extra layer of meaning about division, change, and hope. So the city itself almost feels like a character, with its history and mood influencing the story in subtle ways. Before we jump into the deeper analysis, it's worth mentioning how the film did in the real world. Wings of Desire wasn't a blockbuster, but it earned a strong reputation among critics and cinephiles, winning awards and gaining a devoted fan base. Its influence can be seen in later films that explore the idea of unseen watchers or angels, and even in Hollywood remakes like City of Angels. But many argue that Wenders' original keeps a special magic that's hard to replicate. Its quiet, thoughtful tone, and the way it treats its themes with respect and care. So, to sum it up, Wings of Desire is not just a movie you watch, it's one you experience. It challenges you to think about what it means to live, to feel, and to connect. It's beautifully acted, visually creative, and emotionally deep. Whether you're into fantasy, drama, or just stories that make you feel something real, this film has something to offer. And in this analysis, we'll break down how all these parts come together to create a film that's still talked about and loved more than 30 years after it first came out. When you think about Wings of Desire, the first thing that hits you is how it doesn't fit neatly into just one genre, which makes it pretty unique and interesting to talk about. It's often labeled as a fantasy drama, but honestly, it's more like a blend of genres that together create a mood and atmosphere you don't see a lot in movies, especially back in the 80s. The fantasy part comes from the presence of angels who observe the city and its people invisibly. Yet, this fantasy isn't the kind with magical battles or clearly defined supernatural rules. It's subtle and poetic, almost like a dream or a meditation on existence. Then there's the drama, which is rooted deeply in human emotion. Loneliness, love, longing, and the struggle to connect. But even calling it a drama doesn't quite cover it, because the film moves so slowly and thoughtfully, inviting you to sit with the characters' thoughts and feelings rather than rushing through a plot. It's a mood piece, really, one that asks you to feel as much as watch, and that's what sets it apart from your typical fantasy or drama flick. You don't get a clear villain or a ticking clock. Instead, you get a city, Berlin, full of quiet stories and lost souls. and these angels who want to bridge the gap between the eternal and the everyday. What's fascinating is how Wings of Desire fits into the broader history of fantasy films, especially those that use supernatural or spiritual beings as metaphors for human experience. You can see some similarities with movies like The Seventh Seal, where death plays a character to explore existential questions, or even It's a Wonderful Life, which also uses an angelic figure to explore the value of life and human connection. But Wenders takes it a step further by making the angels invisible observers who feel both removed and deeply connected at the same time, which creates this bittersweet tension throughout the film. It's like the angels are both blessed and cursed. They can see and hear everything, but can't touch or change much until Daniel's decision shifts the whole idea. This is not just a story about angels, but about the human condition seen through the eyes of those who are outside it. The fantasy is really a tool for a much bigger meditation on life, loneliness, and the desire for meaning. It's this thoughtful blend that places the film somewhere between fantasy, philosophy, and art house drama, rather than the commercial fantasy or superhero movies we're used to today. Another way to look at Wings of Desire is to compare it with other films that explore the idea of unseen watchers or dual realities. For example, Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven, or even The Tree of Life, touch on spirituality and human experience with poetic visuals and philosophical voiceovers, similar to Wenders' style. But while Malick's work often feels rooted in nature and the cosmos, Wings of Desire is deeply urban, focusing on a divided city during a time of political tension. Berlin in the 80s wasn't just any city. It was a symbol of separation and longing for unity, which adds a layer of historical weight to the film's themes. So, the city isn't just a backdrop, but almost a character itself, full of silence, shadows, and secrets. This urban fantasy angle is a kind of genre twist, mixing city drama with spiritual fantasy that gives the film a very distinct feel compared to more pastoral or mythical fantasy films. The influence of German Expressionism, a style known for its stark visuals and emotional intensity, is also pretty clear if you look closely. The black and white cinematography and the way shadows and light play across the screen create a mood that's both haunting and beautiful. This isn't a coincidence. Wenders is known for being influenced by classic cinema, and the film pays homage to earlier European filmmakers who used light and shadow to explore inner states of mind. Think of movies like Nosferatu or Metropolis, where the visual style carries as much meaning as the story itself. In Wings of Desire, the use of black and white for the angel's perspective reflects a kind of timeless, otherworldly existence, while the switch to color for human scenes brings vibrancy and imperfection into focus. This stylistic choice shows how cinema history and genre traditions inform the way the story is told, making the film a bridge between old and new ways of filmmaking. On the flip side, the film also plays with the expectations of the fantasy genre by grounding its story in very real and everyday struggles. The angels listen to the thoughts of characters who are dealing with loneliness, heartbreak, and searching for meaning, issues that are very human and relatable. Instead of grandiose quests or epic battles, we get quiet moments like a street vendor calling out to customers or a young girl hiding from her fears. These simple human experiences become deeply meaningful because of how they're framed. So while the fantasy element might suggest something magical or otherworldly, The film constantly pulls you back to the everyday, showing that there's something magical in ordinary life itself. It's almost like Wenders is saying, the real fantasy is the human experience, and that angels, or maybe the audience, are just trying to understand it. Another interesting influence comes from literature, especially poetry and philosophical writings. The film has a poetic voiceover narration, and many critics have pointed out that it feels like a visual poem rather than a straightforward story. The angel's reflections are often philosophical, asking questions like, what is the meaning of life? Or why do people suffer? These questions don't have easy answers, but the film suggests that maybe the answer is found in connection and experiencing life fully, even with its pain. The poetic tone invites viewers to reflect on their own lives, which is pretty rare for most movies that focus more on plot than meaning. It's like reading a poem that's been turned into a movie, something slow, thoughtful, and full of quiet power. What's cool is how Wings of Desire doesn't just stick to one idea of angels. Instead, it creates a whole system of beings with their own rules and limitations. The angels can hear everything, but don't interfere. Their presence is sometimes comforting, but also sad, because they are so close, yet so far from human experience. This takes the typical angel story and turns it upside down. Usually, angels are helpers or guides, but here they are more like watchers who long to be part of the life they observe. It's a bit like watching a beautiful painting and wanting to step inside it. This idea influences how we think about observation and participation, not just in the movie, but in life itself. Are we just watching our lives pass by, or are we truly living them? Now, looking at how Wings of Desire honors and subverts genre expectations, it's clear that the film respects the fantasy tradition by including supernatural elements, but it refuses to give easy answers or neat conclusions. There's no classic hero's journey or a clear good versus evil battle. Instead, it focuses on internal transformation and emotional discovery. It's like the film says, the real magic is in the ordinary moments, the small acts of kindness, and the choice to embrace life. This can be frustrating if you expect fast-paced action or a big climax. But if you let yourself sink into the movie's rhythm, it's incredibly rewarding. It subverts the idea that fantasy has to be about epic quests or supernatural powers used to defeat evil. Here, the fantasy serves as a metaphor for being alive and aware in a complicated world. The film also influenced a lot of later works in the fantasy and drama genres. For example, Hollywood's City of Angels was a direct remake, but many fans argue it lost some of the original subtlety and poetic charm. The original's blending of the mundane and the mystical, the use of Berlin's cityscape, and its reflective tone make it much richer. You can see echoes of Wings of Desire in modern movies and TV shows that explore invisible watchers or spirits longing to be human, but few capture that mix of philosophy, emotion, and visual beauty so well. To wrap it up, Wings of Desire fits into the fantasy drama genre, but in a way that's pretty unique and layered. It draws from German cinematic traditions, urban drama, poetry, and philosophical literature, creating a film that's as much about feeling and thought as it is about story. It honors fantasy by embracing supernatural elements, but uses them to explore real human experiences, turning the genre on its head. It's slow, reflective, and deeply emotional. a film that asks more questions than it answers and invites viewers to find their own meaning. So if you love movies that make you think, feel, and look at the world differently, this film is a masterclass in how genres can be stretched and redefined to tell something fresh and timeless. When you look at Wings of Desire and how it came to be, you realize it wasn't just a random idea that popped into Wim Wenders' head overnight. The film's development and writing process reveal a lot about why it feels so unique and deeply personal. The story actually grew from Wenders' fascination with angels and the human condition, but more importantly, it came from a desire to explore the invisible emotions and silent stories all around us, especially in a city like Berlin that was split and full of tension at the time. The idea wasn't just to make a fantasy about angels, it was to use these supernatural beings as a way to peek into the loneliness and hope of everyday people. What's cool is that the concept itself was inspired by a book written by Peter Handke, a well-known Austrian writer, who had this poetic style that clearly influenced the movie's tone. Handke's writings often deal with silence, the small things, and the spaces between people's words, which fits perfectly with what Wings of Desire tries to do. So, from the start, the movie's story wasn't about grand events, but about the quiet moments that make life what it is. Wenders didn't just jump into writing the screenplay alone. He worked closely with two key collaborators, Peter Handke, who wrote the original book, Fragmente, Nachträge zu einem Bericht, which loosely translates to fragments, supplements to a report, and the poet and playwright Richard Ridinger. Together, they crafted the screenplay in a way that wasn't just about telling a straight story, but about capturing moods, thoughts, and feelings. Their writing process was very much a group effort, focusing on how to turn Handke's poetic text into something visual and cinematic without losing the subtlety and depth of the source material. They wanted the screenplay to feel like a poem on screen, full of pauses, reflections, and voices that reveal inner lives. This approach was quite different from typical Hollywood scripts, which usually focus on fast-moving plots and clear dialogue. Instead, Wenders and his team aimed for something slower, more atmospheric, and introspective. It's interesting to note that the script wasn't written in a typical linear way either, because the story revolves around angels who are observing many people's lives. The script included a lot of fragmented scenes and multiple voiceovers. This meant they had to carefully balance all these perspectives without confusing the audience. The angels' monologues and the humans' thoughts all overlap and flow into each other, creating this layered texture of sound and meaning. Wenders has said in interviews that one of the challenges was deciding how much to show and how much to keep hidden. After all, the angels are invisible, so the story had to rely on voice and mood rather than action or visual effects. This challenge pushed the writing toward a more poetic and symbolic style, where words and images work together to suggest feelings instead of spelling everything out clearly. During the development, some ideas changed quite a bit from the original concept. For example, the character of Daniel, the main angel who eventually wants to become human, was shaped to be more relatable and emotional than a typical supernatural being. Early drafts might have kept him more distant or mysterious, but as Wenders and his team worked through the script, they realized the heart of the story had to be Daniel's desire to experience life fully, with all its risks and joys. This change gave the movie its emotional center and made Daniel's journey something the audience could really connect with. Similarly, the human characters were given more depth, especially Marion, the trapeze artist, whose loneliness and struggles provide a contrast to the angel's immortality and detachment. This layering of characters helped balance the fantasy elements with real human stories, making the film feel grounded even as it explored otherworldly ideas. One of the most impressive parts of the writing is how it balances the philosophical themes with moments of humor and tenderness. Even though the film deals with heavy questions about life, death, and existence, the screenplay never feels preachy or overly serious. There are moments of lightness, like when the angels observe people in everyday situations, someone reading a newspaper, a kid playing in the street, or a vendor calling out to customers. These small scenes add warmth and humor, showing that the film's heart lies in everyday life. It's like the script is constantly reminding you that even in the grand questions of existence, it's the small moments that matter most. That balance is tricky to achieve, but the writing team nailed it by mixing deep reflections with real human details. Another cool thing about the script is how it uses Berlin not just as a setting, but almost like a character itself. The screenplay includes descriptions of the city's streets, the divided wall, and the people living there, making the political and social atmosphere an undercurrent to the story. Berlin in the 80s was a place of division and tension, but also hope and change, and the script captures that feeling without making the movie feel like a political lecture. Instead, the city's mood enhances the story's themes of separation and connection. You can almost feel the walls and the cold air through the words, adding weight to Damiel's longing to become human and experience the world. This focus on place makes the script richer and more textured, turning the movie into a snapshot of a specific time and place that also feels universal. Technically, the screenplay was quite unconventional for its time, especially with the extensive use of voiceover narration. Most films use voiceover sparingly, but here it's essential. It lets us hear what the angels think and what the humans feel, creating intimacy and depth. Writing these voiceovers required a delicate touch so they wouldn't overwhelm the visuals or slow down the pace too much. The writers had to find a rhythm where the words flowed naturally with the scenes, almost like a stream of consciousness. This was risky because it could have made the film feel boring or confusing, but instead it gives the movie a hypnotic, dreamlike quality. When Damiel speaks about his desire to feel human, I want to touch people, I want to be like them, you realize how carefully the words were chosen to be simple but powerful, carrying the entire emotional weight of the story. Wenders has mentioned that during the writing and pre-production phases, there was a lot of discussion about how to make the invisible visible. Since the angels can't interact with the world in a physical way, the screenplay had to find creative solutions to show their presence on screen. This challenge influenced the writing, pushing the team to think about how characters' gazes, sounds, and the city's atmosphere could suggest an unseen watcher. For example, the script includes moments where the camera lingers on faces or places, letting the audience feel the angel's perspective without explicitly showing them. This subtlety is part of what makes the film so special. It respects the audience's intelligence and lets them fill in the blanks, creating a personal connection with the story. In terms of character development within the script, the writing pays close attention to emotional arcs rather than traditional plot arcs. Daniel's journey isn't about defeating a villain or solving a mystery, but about growing from a detached observer into someone who chooses to embrace life fully, with all its imperfections. Marion's character is also carefully developed through brief but meaningful moments that show her vulnerability and strength. The screenplay's focus on interiority rather than action means it relies heavily on dialogue, monologues, and visual storytelling to build these arcs. This approach makes the characters feel real and relatable because it shows us their inner worlds rather than just their external actions. One of the final touches in the writing was balancing the film's philosophical depth with accessibility. The script could have become too abstract or heavy, but instead it remains inviting and warm. That's partly thanks to the humor and tenderness woven throughout, but also because the writers used simple, everyday language even in the voiceovers. This way, the big ideas are still there, but they're wrapped in a human story you can follow and feel. It's like a conversation rather than a lecture, which helps the audience connect with the film on an emotional level. Overall, the development and writing process of Wings of Desire show how much care and thought went into creating a film that's both a philosophical meditation and a heartfelt story. The collaboration between Wim Wenders, Peter Handke, and Richard Reidinger brought together poetry, philosophy, and cinema in a way that feels natural and profound. The script's balance of fantasy and reality, its layered characters, and its innovative use of voiceover and setting make it a true original. So, when you watch the film, you're seeing the result of years of careful writing and creative problem-solving, an effort to make a movie that speaks to the soul and invites you to look at the world with new eyes. Talking about Wings of Desire without focusing on Wim Wenders' direction is impossible because the whole film is really a showcase of his unique creative vision. Wenders was already an established director by the time this movie came out in 1987, known for his deep interest in exploring characters who feel lost or out of place, and for capturing the mood of cities and landscapes in a way that almost makes them characters themselves. Before this, he had worked on films like Paris, Texas, which also dives into themes of loneliness, searching, and the struggle to connect. So Winds of Desire fits naturally into his body of work, but it also pushes his style in new directions. His creative approach here was deeply personal and thoughtful, aiming not just to tell a story, but to create a mood, a feeling of quiet observation that lingers long after the movie ends. You can tell from the start that Wenders wasn't interested in flashy effects or fast-paced action. Instead, he wanted to slow everything down and give viewers space to breathe and think, which is a bold choice, especially for a fantasy film in the 80s. One of the most striking things about Wenders' direction is how he plays with the idea of perspective, literally showing us the world through the eyes of the angels and the humans. This isn't just a storytelling trick, it's a key part of the movie's emotional core. Wenders uses black and white cinematography to represent the angel's view, timeless, calm, almost detached, while switching to color when we see the human world, full of emotion, imperfection, and warmth. This visual language is a brilliant way to make us feel the divide between the immortal and mortal worlds without needing heavy exposition. Wenders and the cinematographer, Henri Alekan, crafted these contrasts carefully, using lighting and composition to make the angel scenes feel ethereal and otherworldly, while the human scenes burst with life and texture. It's not just a style choice, it's a way to deepen the themes of longing and separation. And fun fact, Henri Alekan was already famous for his work on classic films like La Belle et la Bête, Beauty and the Beast, so having his expertise helped bring that dreamy, poetic look to life. Wenders' trust in Alekan's experience really paid off, giving the film that timeless visual beauty that's still talked about today. Wenders' creative vision also shines through in the pacing and tone of the film. He deliberately chose a slow, meditative pace that asks viewers to lean into silence and stillness rather than fill every moment with dialogue or action. This choice is a big part of why Wings of Desire feels so different from other fantasy films, especially in the 80s, when blockbuster movies were all about explosions and spectacle. Instead, Wenders trusts the power of small moments, like the simple act of someone listening to a street musician or watching children play, to communicate profound emotions. He understood that real life is often quiet and that magic can be found in those quiet spaces. That's why the film has this poetic rhythm, where scenes flow into one another like thoughts, sometimes overlapping or fading in and out. It's a style that makes you feel like you're drifting through Berlin, sharing the angels' perspective as they watch over the city. One of Wenders' trademarks that's very clear in Wings of Desire is his fascination with cities, especially Berlin. At the time, Berlin was not just a city, but a symbol of division, physically split by the wall, but also emotionally fractured. Wenders captures this atmosphere with a sense of both melancholy and hope. His camera often lingers on empty streets, crumbling buildings, and graffiti, showing the scars of history, but also the quiet resilience of people living there. The city isn't just a backdrop, but a character that reflects the themes of separation, longing, and the possibility of connection. Wenders' direction makes you feel the weight of the city's history without ever getting preachy or political. Instead, it's a poetic observation of a place caught between the past and the future, much like the angels caught between immortality and human experience. Another key part of Wenders' direction is how he handles the performances, especially the lead roles. He works with actors not just to deliver lines, but to embody feelings and silence. Bruno Ganz, who plays Daniel, gives one of his most memorable performances here, partly because Wenders allowed him space to explore subtle emotions through quiet looks, pauses, and body language, rather than big, dramatic moments. The same goes for Solveig Dom Martin as Marion. Their chemistry is understated but powerful, a quiet dance of two lonely souls finding connection. Wenders' direction encourages this naturalism, avoiding overly theatrical acting in favor of something more real and intimate. It's almost like the actors are part of the city's rhythm, moving with it rather than against it. This approach makes the movie feel more authentic and emotionally resonant, as if we're not just watching characters, but feeling their inner lives. Visually and thematically, Wenders is obsessed with the idea of seeing and being seen, which comes through in his use of mirrors, windows, and reflections throughout the film. The camera often frames characters looking through windows or catching glimpses of themselves in mirrors, reinforcing the film's exploration of observation and identity. These visual motifs aren't just pretty shots, they deepen the story's meditation on existence and the barriers between people. For example, the angels can see everything but are invisible themselves, which raises questions about what it means to be truly alive or present. Wenders uses these images to invite the audience to think about their own experience of watching and being watched. Are we like the angels, observers of life, or are we truly part of it? This kind of thematic layering is a hallmark of Wenders' direction. He doesn't just tell you what to think, but creates images and moments that make you wonder and feel. Wenders' use of sound and music also plays a huge role in shaping the film's atmosphere. He carefully integrates the soundtrack, including songs by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and Jürgen Knieper's original score, to enhance the mood without overpowering the visuals. Music becomes a kind of voice for the city and its people, weaving through scenes and carrying emotional weight. The director's choice to include street musicians and the sounds of everyday life grounds the film's poetic tone in reality. This sound design creates a layered experience where you're not just watching the film, but hearing the heartbeat of Berlin itself. It's a subtle but effective way Wenders adds depth to his creative vision. One of the boldest aspects of Wenders' direction is how he embraces ambiguity and resists giving easy answers. The film's ending, where Damiel chooses to become human, isn't wrapped up neatly, but left open to interpretation. This refusal to spoon-feed the audience is a direct result of Wenders' confidence in the story and in viewers' intelligence. It's a film that trusts you to sit with uncertainty and find your own meaning in the images and words. This kind of storytelling is rare in cinema, especially in a genre like fantasy, which often relies on clear moral lines or resolution. Wenders challenges that by showing that life itself is messy, complicated, and filled with contradictions. This creative choice has helped Wings of Desire remain a timeless classic because it speaks to the universal human experience rather than just telling a simple story. Also, Wenders' background in documentary filmmaking influences the film's look and feel. There's a realness to the city scenes that comes from his desire to capture Berlin authentically. The camera often feels like a silent observer itself, drifting through the streets and watching life unfold naturally. This documentary-style approach adds to the film's unique tone. It's both poetic and grounded, spiritual and everyday. It's a tough balance to strike, but Wenders manages it brilliantly, giving the film a texture that feels alive and immediate. Overall, Wim Wenders' direction and creative vision are the heart of Wings of Desire. His commitment to slow, thoughtful storytelling, his use of visual contrasts and symbolic imagery, and his ability to capture the spirit of a city and its people make the film something special. It's a movie that invites you to slow down, listen, and feel, offering a rare cinematic experience where mood and meaning blend seamlessly. Wenders didn't just direct a movie about angels. He crafted a poetic meditation on life, love, and what it means to be human, all through the lens of his own artistic sensibility. That's why, decades later, Wings of Desire still feels fresh and moving. It's a perfect example of how great direction can elevate a story into something truly unforgettable. When you think about Wings of Desire, the first thing that comes to mind isn't just the story or the visuals, but the way the actors breathe life into this delicate, poetic film, making it feel personal and real. Casting for a movie like this was a huge deal because the characters aren't your typical superheroes or action stars. They're subtle, reflective, and full of quiet emotion, which means the actors had to deliver performances that were both restrained and deeply expressive. Wim Wenders made some inspired choices here, especially by casting Bruno Ganz as Damiel, the angel who longs to become human. Ganz wasn't a Hollywood big shot, but he was already respected in European cinema for his ability to portray complex characters with sincerity and depth. What makes his performance in this film so unforgettable is the way he uses silence and small gestures to communicate enormous feelings. You can tell that Wenders saw something special in Ganz. His eyes, his gentle voice, the way he carries himself, and knew that he could express Daniel's longing, loneliness, and hope without needing a lot of words. Ganz's portrayal feels so natural that you almost forget he's playing an angel. Instead, he's just a deeply feeling person caught between two worlds. One of the most memorable moments is when Damiel talks about wanting to experience life's small pleasures, like tasting food or touching another person. And Ganz delivers those lines with a quiet yearning that hits you right in the chest. It's like he's not just telling us about Damiel's desires, but inviting us to remember our own. Opposite Ganz, you have Solveig de Martin as Marion, the trapeze artist. Casting Marion was equally important because she represents the human world's beauty and vulnerability. De Martin wasn't a big star either, but her performance is filled with this fragile strength that perfectly complements Ganz's gentle intensity. The chemistry between these two is subtle but electric. Wenders didn't want over-the-top romance. Instead, he focused on moments of quiet connection, like a shared glance or a soft touch, that feel incredibly intimate and real. Dom Martin's Marion is someone who carries loneliness with dignity, and through her, the film shows the pain and hope of people who feel isolated in a big city. Their interactions don't rely on flashy dialogue or dramatic scenes, but on the unspoken emotions that flow between them, making their story all the more touching. There's a scene where Marion performs on the trapeze, and the camera lingers on her in a way that feels almost sacred, capturing not just her physical skill, but her inner world. Dalmartin's ability to communicate that without words is a testament to her talent and Wenders' skill in guiding actors toward subtlety. The supporting cast also deserves a lot of praise because they add layers to the film's world without ever stealing the spotlight. Otto Sander as Casil, the other main angel, brings a quiet, contemplative presence that balances Ganz's more yearning Damiel. Sander's performance shows the weight of immortality and the tension between observing and participating in life. There's a calmness to Casil that feels like the voice of reason or acceptance, which contrasts with Damiel's restless desire for change. This dynamic between the two angels creates an interesting emotional push and pull that adds complexity to the story. Other supporting characters, like the poet Homer and the various Berlin residents the angels observe, enrich the film with their small stories and moments of humanity. Each actor, whether in a lead or minor role, was chosen carefully to embody the everyday people who populate the city, making Berlin feel alive and real. It's this attention to authentic performances that sets Wings of Desire apart from more conventional fantasy films, where characters can sometimes feel like caricatures. What's really fascinating about the casting is how Wenders managed to find actors who could deliver performances that are almost like a silent film in some parts. Since a big part of the film relies on voiceovers and internal monologues, the actors' physical expressions become incredibly important. They don't just speak their lines, they convey emotions through posture, eye movement, and the smallest facial expressions. This kind of acting demands a lot from performers, and the cast rises to the challenge with grace. For example, Bruno Ganz's portrayal of Damiel often involves long moments of just looking and listening, and those scenes are some of the most powerful in the movie. It's like the audience is invited into Damiel's mind, seeing the world through his eyes, feeling his loneliness and wonder. Ganz's ability to sustain that kind of performance without it feeling dull or repetitive is impressive and key to why the film works so well emotionally. Another interesting layer to the performances is how Wenders encouraged improvisation and natural interactions to capture the spontaneity of real life. The film's scenes feel lived in, like moments plucked from everyday existence rather than scripted dialogue. This approach makes the characters feel more genuine and relatable. The conversations between characters sometimes have a poetic, almost rambling quality, which reflects how people actually talk when they're thinking out loud or trying to understand their feelings. Wenders wanted to avoid anything that felt staged or artificial, and the actors' freedom to explore their roles helps create that authentic vibe. It's especially noticeable in scenes where Damiel and Marion interact. There's a natural rhythm that feels like watching two people discovering each other slowly and carefully. On the flip side, Wenders' decision not to use famous Hollywood stars was a deliberate one that paid off. The cast's European actors might not have had huge global recognition at the time, but their performances carry a raw honesty that would have been hard to achieve with bigger names. This choice helped the film stay grounded and intimate, which is crucial for a story about observing the quiet struggles and joys of everyday life. The casting supports the film's overall mood of contemplation and tenderness, creating a sense that these characters could be anyone you see on the street. That universality is part of what makes the movie so timeless. It's less about who the actors are and more about what they represent as human beings. Interestingly, the film also plays with the idea of performance within performance. Marion is a trapeze artist, someone who literally performs for an audience, which adds a meta layer to the casting. Dom Martin's ability to portray an artist who is both strong and vulnerable mirrors the film's own delicate balance between art and life. The way Wenders directs her trapeze scenes with slow motion and focused close-ups highlights the beauty and risk of performance, making Marion's character symbolic of human creativity and longing. This casting choice enhances the thematic resonance of the film, showing how art and life intersect and how both are acts of vulnerability. Critics at the time praised the casting and performances for their subtlety and emotional depth. Bruno Ganz, in particular, received a lot of attention for his ability to carry the film with a mix of quiet strength and yearning. Even today, many viewers highlight his performance as one of the most moving and unforgettable in European cinema. The chemistry between Ganz and Martin is often cited as a highlight, creating a romantic tension that never feels forced or cliché. Their relationship unfolds slowly, naturally, and beautifully, a reflection of the film's larger themes about connection and the human desire to be seen and loved. Overall, the casting and performances in Wings of Desire are central to why the film feels so alive and meaningful. Wim Wenders' choices to work with actors who could bring subtlety, depth, and naturalism to their roles create a cinematic experience that's intimate and poetic at the same time. The actors don't just act, they embody the film's themes of loneliness, hope, and the search for meaning. Their performances invite the audience to slow down and feel the world in a new way, making Wings of Desire not just a movie to watch, but an experience to live through. It's a reminder that sometimes the quietest performances say the most, and that great casting isn't about star power, but about finding people who can touch your heart in unexpected ways. Daniel, the central figure in Wings of Desire, is one of the most fascinating protagonists you'll come across in cinema, not because he's flashy or a traditional hero, but because his journey is so deeply human, even though he starts out as an angel. From the very beginning, Daniel stands out among the angels due to his quiet curiosity and a restless longing to experience life as humans do. Unlike his fellow angel Cassiel, who seems to accept their immortal existence with calm resignation, Daniel is filled with a sense of yearning and wonder. It's like he's tired of being a silent observer, tired of only hearing the thoughts and feelings of the people around him without ever being able to touch or truly join their world. That desire to feel, to taste, to love, those basic human experiences, drives his entire arc, making his story not just about angels, but about what it means to be alive. Wim Wenders crafted Daniel's character with so much care that you can't help but feel connected to him, even though he's not human at the start. Daniel's background as an angel is important because it sets up the emotional and philosophical questions the movie explores. He's immortal, invisible, and unable to interfere with the human world except as a watcher and listener. This role comes with a bittersweet beauty. He can witness moments of joy and sorrow in people's lives, but he can never fully take part. This duality defines Daniel's internal struggle throughout the film. What's fascinating is how Wenders uses Daniel to explore ideas of loneliness and connection, which are feelings everyone can relate to. Daniel's existence as an angel is a metaphor for being disconnected from others, like feeling invisible in your own life or watching from the sidelines. His choice to become human is like a leap of faith, a willingness to give up safety and certainty for the messy, unpredictable experience of life. This choice embodies the film's central theme, that to be fully alive is to accept vulnerability and imperfection. The emotional arc of Daniel is slow and subtle, but incredibly powerful. Instead of dramatic outbursts or big speeches, his growth is shown through quiet moments and small decisions. For instance, his fascination with Marion is not just about falling in love, but about what she represents: connection, creativity, and the tangible, sensory world that he craves. Through his eyes, we see the beauty of human life in all its small details. The way light falls on a building, the sound of children playing, the taste of an orange. These moments feel fresh and precious because Daniel is discovering them for the first time. There's a scene where he watches Marion perform on the trapeze, and you can almost feel his awe and longing through Bruno Ganz's gentle expressions. This scene highlights how Daniel's emotional growth isn't rushed, but carefully layered, which makes his eventual decision to become human feel earned and meaningful rather than sudden or forced. Symbolically, Damiel represents the archetype of the outsider who desires to belong, which is a universal theme. His angelic nature sets him apart from humans, but his emotions make him deeply relatable. He embodies the tension between the spiritual and the physical, between watching life and living it. This archetype has been explored in literature and film before, but Wenders gives it a fresh, poetic take by focusing on the small, everyday experiences that define human existence. Damiel's journey can be seen as a metaphor for anyone who has ever felt isolated or longed for deeper connection, which is probably why the film resonates so much with viewers. His transformation from detached observer to active participant mirrors the human struggle to find meaning and embrace life's uncertainty. Another interesting layer to Damiel's character is his sensitivity to the city of Berlin itself. He doesn't just see the people, he feels the spirit of the city, its history, its pain, and its hope. This connection to place is part of what makes Damiel's story so rich. Wim Wenders uses Berlin almost as an extension of Damiel's inner world, reflecting the protagonist's own feelings of division and longing. The city's physical division by the wall and its cultural complexity mirror Damiel's emotional conflict between detachment and engagement. This relationship between character and setting deepens the narrative and gives Damiel's arc a broader resonance beyond just his personal experience. It suggests that the desire to connect and be fully alive is not just an individual struggle, but something tied to the places we inhabit and the histories we carry. Wenders also uses Damiel's internal monologues to provide insight into his thoughts and feelings, which adds depth to his character. The voiceover narration allows the audience to hear Damiel's reflections on life, love, and existence, making him feel like a guide through the film's philosophical themes. These voiceovers are poetic but never feel pretentious. Instead, they invite the viewer to slow down and consider the beauty and pain of being human. For example, Damiel muses on how humans experience time differently than angels, how the physical world is full of sensations that are both joyful and painful. This kind of introspection helps make Damiel's character relatable and thoughtful, encouraging the audience to think about their own lives and what it means to truly live. It's a brilliant storytelling technique that strengthens the emotional connection between Damiel and the viewer. One of the most important moments in Damiel's arc is his decision to become human, which is both a literal and symbolic act. This choice is a powerful statement about the value of human experience, with all its flaws and challenges. Wenders doesn't present this decision as an easy escape from the angelic realm, but as a courageous leap into vulnerability and uncertainty. By choosing to give up immortality and the ability to observe without consequence, Damiel embraces the full spectrum of life, including pain, love, and mortality. This moment is a profound exploration of what it means to be human, not perfect, not all-knowing, but deeply connected to others and the world around you. It's a choice that carries risks, but also the potential for true fulfillment. This theme is beautifully summed up in the film's closing moments, where Damiel steps into the human world with a new sense of wonder and possibility. Damiel's journey also touches on spiritual and existential questions about identity and the soul. As an angel, he is a being of pure spirit, but his desire to become human raises questions about what defines us as individuals. Is it our physical body, our emotions, our experiences? Wenders doesn't give clear answers, but instead invites us to reflect on these mysteries alongside Daniel. This ambiguity is part of what makes Daniel such a compelling protagonist. He's both an angel and a seeker, embodying the tension between the eternal and the temporal. His story encourages viewers to think about their own lives and what parts of themselves they might long to embrace or change. Daniel's character is a meditation on the human condition itself, making him timeless and universally resonant. Lastly, the emotional weight of Daniel's arc is amplified by Bruno Ganz's remarkable performance. Ganz manages to convey Daniel's transformation with incredible subtlety, from the detached calm of an angel to the tender vulnerability of a man experiencing life's sensations for the first time. His expressions, body language, and voice all contribute to making Daniel feel like a living, breathing person rather than a mythical figure. This performance helps ground the film's lofty themes in real emotion, making Daniel's journey deeply affecting. When Daniel finally walks through the streets of Berlin as a human, we don't just see a character changing, we feel a universal story about longing, hope, and the search for meaning unfold right in front of us. In conclusion, Daniel is a beautifully crafted protagonist whose journey from angel to human is both poetic and deeply relatable. He represents the universal human desire to connect, to feel, and to be part of something greater, even if it means embracing uncertainty and pain. His character is a perfect reflection of Wings of Desire's themes, blending spirituality, philosophy, and raw emotion into a story that continues to resonate with audiences decades after its release. Wim Wenders and Bruno Ganz created a character who invites us to slow down, look closely at life's small moments, and find meaning in the act of simply being alive. Daniel's story is a reminder that to be human is to be vulnerable, curious, and full of wonder, and that's what makes life worth living. Unlike many films that hinge on a clear villain or antagonist, Wings of Desire takes a very different, more subtle approach to conflict and opposition, which is one of the reasons it stands out as a movie. Instead of a traditional bad guy, the film's tension comes from deeper, more philosophical sources, and the antagonistic forces are often abstract: loneliness, isolation, the pain of disconnection, and the invisible barriers between people. In this sense, the antagonist is not a person, but rather the human condition itself, as experienced in the divided city of Berlin during the 1980s. Wim Wenders skillfully uses this setup to explore how these invisible struggles shape the lives of both humans and angels. For example, Daniel and Cassiel, the two angels we follow, observe people wrestling with grief, lost love, political division, and the search for meaning. These are not easy battles to fight, and the angels are powerless to intervene, which creates a unique kind of tension and sadness. The film's main source of conflict revolves around whether Daniel will remain a detached observer or take the risk to become human and embrace the messiness of life. This internal struggle is a quiet but powerful antagonist driving the narrative. One of the film's subtle antagonistic forces is the physical and ideological division of Berlin itself. The city, split into east and west by the wall, stands as a symbol of separation and alienation. The wall is a barrier not just between places, but between people, families, and ideologies. Although it doesn't appear as a traditional villain, its presence looms over the characters, shaping their experiences and their sense of isolation. The angels float over this divided city, witnessing the pain caused by this division, people cut off from each other, political tension, and a sense of trapped despair. This backdrop adds a real-world weight to the film's otherwise poetic and spiritual narrative. It's interesting how Wenders uses Berlin almost as a character itself, a constant reminder of human conflict and the longing for connection. So, in a way, the wall functions like an antagonist that the film never directly fights, but always acknowledges. Beyond these larger forces, the film also offers smaller, more human antagonistic moments in the form of characters who represent different kinds of suffering or disconnect. For instance, the character of Homer, the blind poet, provides an intriguing contrast to the angels. Though blind, Homer experiences the world with an intensity and passion that the angels envy. His poetic view of life highlights the beauty and tragedy of human existence, but his blindness also symbolizes a kind of limitation and loss. Homer is not an antagonist in the usual sense, but his presence challenges the angels, and especially Damiel, by showing the richness of human life despite its struggles. His poems, delivered with raw emotion, underscore the themes of longing and loss and serve as a reminder of what Damiel yearns to be part of. Homer's interactions with the angels add complexity to the story, showing that human suffering and creativity are deeply intertwined. The supporting characters in Wings of Desire all serve to deepen the film's exploration of loneliness and connection. The film features a range of Berlin residents going about their daily lives, vendors, lovers, children, and strangers, each with their own small stories and emotional struggles. The angels observe these moments, giving the audience a glimpse into the private, often unseen parts of people's lives. These characters aren't developed like traditional movie roles. Instead, they function as pieces of a larger mosaic representing human experience. This storytelling choice creates a feeling of community and shared humanity, showing that while everyone has their own burdens, they're also connected in subtle ways. It's a clever way for Wenders to emphasize the film's themes without relying on dramatic plot twists or villainous characters. Another fascinating supporting role is the angel Cassiel, played by Otto Sander. He represents the more cautious, resigned side of angelic existence. Cassiel is hesitant about Damiel's desire to become human and serves as a kind of foil to him. His quiet acceptance of their eternal role highlights the tension between embracing change and clinging to what's familiar. Cassiel's presence adds emotional weight to the story because he embodies what Damiel risks losing, the safety and detachment of immortality. His restrained performance communicates a sense of melancholy and wisdom, reminding the audience of the sacrifices involved in Damiel's choice. In this way, Cassiel functions almost like an internal antagonist, a voice of caution and doubt that Damiel must overcome to follow his heart. The interplay between Damiel and Cassiel also highlights the different ways individuals cope with isolation and purpose. Cassiel, despite being immortal and invisible, accepts his role as a watcher and listener, which can feel lonely, but also carries a sense of duty and calm. Daniel, however, is restless and yearns for connection and change, making him more vulnerable but also more alive. This contrast creates a subtle dramatic tension that drives much of the film's emotional depth. It's not a battle of good versus evil, but a conflict between passivity and action, between observation and participation. This nuanced antagonist dynamic is rare in films, especially in one that blends fantasy and reality so seamlessly. The film also features moments where the angels witness acts of cruelty, despair, and violence, further reinforcing the antagonistic forces at play in the world. These scenes remind us that the human experience is not just about beauty and connection, but also pain and suffering. The angel's inability to intervene in these moments adds a layer of helplessness and poignancy. It's as if the film is saying that life is full of contradictions and challenges that no one can escape, not even supernatural beings. This recognition of the darker sides of humanity makes the film more honest and emotionally rich, as it doesn't shy away from the complexity of existence. One of the film's strengths is how it avoids clear-cut villains and instead presents antagonism as something more existential and internal. The real opposition comes from within the characters themselves, the fear of loneliness, the pain of separation, the longing for meaning. This internal conflict is what makes Wings of Desire resonate on such a deep level. It asks questions like, what does it mean to be truly alive? How do we overcome the walls, literal and metaphorical, that keep us apart? And can we find connection in a fragmented world? These are not easy questions, and the film's refusal to offer simple answers adds to its poetic and philosophical power. In summary, the antagonists in Wings of Desire are not traditional villains, but rather the invisible forces that shape human lives: loneliness, separation, division, and internal doubt. The film's supporting characters enrich this exploration by providing different perspectives on these struggles, whether through the cautious Cassiel, the passionate poet Homer, or the people of Berlin going about their daily lives. Wim Wenders' choice to focus on these subtle conflicts rather than external battles makes the film a deeply thoughtful meditation on existence. It challenges the audience to look beyond the usual ideas of good and evil and instead consider the more complicated, often painful realities of being human. This approach to antagonism is what gives Wings of Desire its unique emotional depth and lasting impact. One of the most striking things about Wings of Desire is how deeply the setting, Berlin in the 1980s, shapes everything about the film's mood, story, and themes. The city isn't just a backdrop or a place where the story happens. It's almost like another character in the film, filled with history, emotions, and contrasts that reflect the inner worlds of the characters, especially the angels. At the time the film was made, Berlin was a city divided by the infamous wall, a physical and symbolic barrier that split east and west and became a global symbol of separation and conflict. Wim Wenders uses this division not only as a literal setting, but as a powerful metaphor for the human condition, the invisible walls that keep people isolated from each other emotionally and spiritually. The cracked, worn streets, the graffiti-covered walls, the stark architecture, and the muted color palette of the city all contribute to a feeling of melancholy and longing that permeates the film. It's like Berlin is holding its breath, caught between the past and the future, hope and despair, connection and isolation, which mirrors the emotional landscape of the characters we follow. Wenders was very intentional about shooting on location in Berlin, capturing the city's unique atmosphere in a way that feels authentic and alive. You can sense the tension in the air. The ghosts of history and war still linger, and the city is both vibrant and haunted. This duality perfectly suits the film's exploration of invisible beings who watch over the living and the human souls caught between suffering and joy. The film uses both black and white and color cinematography to further emphasize this contrast. The angels' perspective is mostly shown in black and white, emphasizing their detachment and timelessness, while the human world bursts into color when we see Damiel interact with it. This stylistic choice deepens the audience's immersion into the dual realities of the film and highlights how setting is tied to perception and existence. The way Berlin looks in the film, sometimes cold and harsh, other times warm and inviting, reflects how the characters feel and how the city's history shapes their lives. The specific locations chosen for filming also add layers of meaning to the story. For instance, scenes take place in iconic Berlin landmarks like the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church, a ruined church left as a reminder of war and destruction, standing alongside modern buildings. This visual mix of old and new, destruction and rebuilding perfectly symbolizes the film's themes of memory, loss, and hope. It reminds us that the city, and by extension, the people living in it, carries the scars of history, but also has the capacity for renewal and change. The angels float through these spaces, observing the lives unfolding beneath, which reinforces the idea that history and personal experience are intertwined. The choice to shoot in real places rather than sets gives the film a raw and textured feel, grounding its philosophical ideas in a tangible reality. In addition to the physical spaces, Wenders captures the everyday life of Berliners with a kind of quiet reverence. There are scenes of markets, street musicians, children playing, lovers meeting, and workers going about their routines. These moments, though small, build a rich tapestry of human experience and make the city feel lived in and full of stories. It's not just the famous landmarks that matter, but also the ordinary places where life happens. This attention to detail enhances the world building because it makes the film's emotional and spiritual themes feel more immediate and relatable. You get a real sense of what it's like to walk those streets, to feel the weather, hear the sounds, and see the mix of faces. This groundedness is essential because it contrasts with the supernatural elements of the story, the angels' invisibility and immortality, and highlights the beauty and complexity of the human world they watch over. The setting also plays a role in shaping the film's mood and pacing. Berlin's gray skies and shadows create a quiet, contemplative atmosphere that matches the film's slow, meditative rhythm. It's not a film filled with fast action or loud spectacle, but one that invites viewers to slow down and absorb the details. The way light falls on a building, the way people move and interact, the subtle expressions on their faces. This mood makes the setting feel like a space for reflection and wonder, a city caught between worlds, just like the angels and humans at the heart of the story. The city's history of division adds an emotional weight to every scene, reminding the audience that behind everyday life are deep stories of separation, loss, and hope. Wenders also uses sound design in conjunction with the setting to immerse viewers in Berlin's atmosphere. The ambient city sounds, Footsteps echoing on pavement, distant conversations, the hum of traffic, birdsong, are captured with such care that they become part of the film's texture. These sounds help root the story in a real place and time, making the spiritual themes feel connected to physical reality. It's almost as if the city itself is breathing alongside the characters, alive and full of energy, even in moments of quiet solitude. This combination of visual and auditory world building makes Berlin feel like a living, breathing entity, one that holds memories and emotions as deeply as the people who inhabit it. Another important aspect of the setting is how it reflects and enhances the film's themes of invisibility and connection. The angels can see and hear everyone's thoughts and feelings, but they remain unseen and unheard themselves. Berlin, with its crowded streets and isolated souls, becomes a perfect playground for this idea. The film shows how people live so close to one another, yet can be utterly alone, trapped behind their own walls of silence or pain. This urban loneliness is a powerful antagonist in itself, making the city both beautiful and heartbreaking. At the same time, the city is full of moments of tenderness and hope. Two strangers sharing a smile, a musician playing for no one in particular, a child's laughter breaking through the grayness. These small moments are what the angels long to experience fully, and Berlin's setting captures that tension between isolation and connection beautifully. The city's geography, split by the wall, also forces the viewer to think about boundaries between people, ideologies, and even life and death. The angels drift freely over these borders, unaffected by physical barriers, which gives them a unique perspective on human division. Their movement through the city without limits contrasts sharply with the confinement many characters feel, symbolizing freedom and detachment. Yet, this freedom is double-edged, because it also means they can't intervene or fully participate in human life. Berlin's setting here becomes a metaphor for the limits and possibilities of existence, what it means to be trapped or free, to observe or engage. It adds a philosophical dimension that elevates the film beyond a simple story and turns it into a meditation on human experience and longing. What's also fascinating about the world building is how it blends realism with a dreamlike quality. While the city and its people are grounded in real life, the angel's perspective introduces elements of fantasy and poetry. The shifts between black and white and color, the slow, floating camera movements, and the moments where time seems to pause all create a surreal, almost magical atmosphere. This blending of styles reflects how the setting is not just a physical place, but also a mental and emotional space. Berlin becomes a place where reality and dreams coexist, where history and the future overlap, and where the spiritual and material worlds meet. This layering of the setting adds richness and complexity to the film, making it a unique experience that feels both familiar and otherworldly. Finally, the film's ending scenes, which take place in the colorful, vibrant world Daniel chooses to join, highlight how setting changes with perspective and choice. Once Daniel becomes human, Berlin is no longer just a city of division and shadows, but a place filled with light, sound, and possibility. This shift shows how our experience of a place can transform based on our inner state and choices. It's a hopeful note that ties together the film's ideas about connection, presence, and the power of embracing life fully. In sum, the setting and world building in Wings of Desire are not just about where the story happens, They're essential to what the story means. Berlin's divided streets, its history, and its people all reflect the film's themes of loneliness, hope, and the search for meaning. Wim Wenders crafts a city that feels both real and poetic, a place where the physical and spiritual collide. Through careful cinematography, sound design, and location choices, the film creates a rich, immersive world that invites viewers to look beyond surface appearances and find the hidden connections between people, places, and moments. The setting becomes a powerful symbol of the human experience itself, a complex, beautiful, sometimes painful journey through life, longing, and love. The first act of Wings of Desire is like stepping into a quiet, dreamlike world that invites you to slow down and really absorb every detail. It begins not with a loud bang or an action-packed scene, but with a gentle introduction to the city of Berlin, seen through the eyes of invisible angels who drift silently over its streets. The film opens in black and white, immediately setting a tone of calm reflection and mystery. You get this feeling of floating above the city, observing life without interrupting it. This opening sequence is really crucial because it lays down the whole mood and theme. The idea of unseen watchers who listen to people's thoughts, feelings, and worries, but can never touch or change what they see. It's almost poetic in how it presents the city as full of private moments. Lovers whispering, a woman staring out a window, a child playing. Each scene loaded with small details that make you want to lean in closer. The camera moves slowly, giving you time to notice the textures of the streets, the faces of strangers, and the quiet hum of everyday life. This is where the film's unique narrative style begins to take shape. Not a traditional story, but a series of emotional snapshots that together tell a bigger story about existence. Right from the start, we meet the angels Damiel and Cassiel, who are the film's central figures. They are invisible, immortal beings who have watched over Berlin and its people for centuries. The film doesn't rush to explain who they are. Instead, it lets you discover their nature through small moments. For instance, you see them listening to the thoughts of passersby, sensing the pain and joy hidden beneath the surface of ordinary life. This approach to exposition, showing instead of telling, makes the audience feel like they are entering a secret world where the spiritual and the human overlap. It's interesting how the film uses silence and minimal dialogue here, letting the visuals and inner monologues create a poetic rhythm. This slow build-up is unusual compared to most movies, but works perfectly for Wings of Desire because it encourages viewers to reflect on what it means to observe life without participating in it. The angels' role as silent witnesses sets up the central conflict of the story, the tension between detachment and engagement, between watching life and living it. The inciting incident, or the event that really sets the story in motion, is also subtle but powerful. It happens when Damiel encounters Ngarian, a lonely trapeze artist who lives in the city. This meeting is electric but quiet. There's no dramatic explosion or chase, just a moment of deep connection between two souls from different worlds. Damiel is instantly drawn to Marian, not just because she is beautiful, but because she embodies the human experiences the angels can only observe from afar: love, pain, longing, and fragility. The scene where Daniel watches Marion rehearsing in the circus tent is beautifully shot, filled with warm light and intimate close-ups that contrast with the cold, gray city streets. You can feel Daniel's longing as he moves closer to her, still unseen, but aching to be part of her world. This moment serves as a turning point for Daniel, planting the seed of his desire to become human. It's a quiet but emotional spark that drives the rest of the film, marking the beginning of his internal struggle and the story's deeper exploration of what it means to live fully. What makes this first act so compelling is how it balances the mystical and the mundane. The angel's supernatural abilities are shown alongside very ordinary human experiences, waiting for a train, walking through crowded streets, sharing a quiet meal. This blend creates a layered narrative where the fantastic and the real coexist seamlessly. It's also worth noting how the film's pacing here resists the usual pressure to rush or cram in information. The city of Berlin itself is introduced as a character in its own right during this act. The film captures the divided city with a mixture of documentary-style realism and poetic imagery. The wall appears not as a mere background detail, but as a looming presence, a silent witness to the separation and pain it causes. The film's choice to film in black and white during the angelic perspective also reinforces the sense of separation and timelessness. When we see the city from the angel's point of view, everything is stripped of color, suggesting a world without full life or emotion. This visual strategy makes the moments when the film switches to color, especially when Daniel interacts with Marion, even more striking. It's like the city itself is waiting for someone to bring it color and warmth. This way of using setting and cinematography in the first act not only grounds the story in a specific time and place, but also supports the film's themes of division, longing, and transformation. Another key element introduced in the first act is the film's exploration of memory and history. Through the angel's eyes, the audience glimpses Berlin's past, the bombed-out ruins, the echoes of war, the stories of people who lived and died there. This historical layering adds depth to the city's portrayal and reminds us that the present is shaped by what came before. The angels, as immortal observers, carry these memories, which gives their perspective a melancholic weight. It's like they are guardians of history, witnessing the ongoing struggles and joys of humanity across time. This connection to history adds a timeless quality to the story and makes the city feel alive with stories waiting to be told. The film's early scenes where the angels wander through these ruins are quietly powerful, suggesting that memory is both a burden and a gift. The first act also establishes the film's tone of quiet melancholy mixed with hope. There's a sadness in the angels' existence. They see pain and loneliness everywhere, but cannot touch or fix it. At the same time, there is a gentle warmth in their care and curiosity about humans. This emotional complexity sets Wings of Desire apart from many films that treat supernatural beings as distant or cold. Here, the angels are deeply empathetic, and their silent watching feels tender rather than detached. Daniel's growing feelings for Marion introduce a personal stake that shifts the tone from observation to desire, hinting at the possibility of change and connection. This tonal blend makes the first act emotionally rich and invites the audience to invest in Daniel's journey even before the main plot unfolds. In terms of storytelling technique, the first act is also notable for its use of nonlinear and poetic narration. The film doesn't follow a straightforward plot, but instead presents a collage of moments, thoughts, and images that gradually build the world and characters. This narrative style challenges viewers to pay close attention and engage with the film on a deeper level. It's a movie that rewards patience and reflection rather than quick answers or easy resolutions. The dialogue is sparse, and much of the storytelling happens through visuals and voiceover, which makes it feel like a poem or a daydream. For example, the angel's inner monologues sometimes overlap with the sounds and conversations of the city, blending reality and imagination in a way that feels unique and immersive. This storytelling approach sets the stage for the rest of the film's philosophical exploration of life and existence. Finally, the first act introduces the key question that drives the entire film. What does it mean to be human? Through Damiel's growing fascination with Marion and the human world, the movie begins to explore the limits of observation and the desire for participation. The angels, immortal and invisible, can only watch life unfold, but Damiel's yearning suggests that life's meaning comes from experience, emotion, and connection. This question resonates throughout the film and invites viewers to reflect on their own lives, relationships, and desires. The quiet, detailed setup of the first act makes this question feel personal and urgent without ever feeling forced or didactic. In summary, the first act of Wings of Desire is a masterclass in subtle storytelling. It introduces characters, setting, and themes with patience and care, creating a world that feels both real and magical. Through its poetic visuals, philosophical narration, and atmospheric setting, the film invites viewers to consider loneliness, connection, history, and the longing to live fully. The inciting incident, the meeting between Damiel and Marion, marks the beginning of a profound transformation, setting the stage for a story that is as much about the inner life as it is about external events. It's a beginning that asks you to look beyond the surface and find the beauty in small moments, making the audience eager to follow Damiel's journey into the unknown. Moving into the second act of Wings of Desire, the story really deepens as Damiel's quiet curiosity transforms into something much more intense and personal, marking a shift from passive observation to active emotional involvement. This middle section of the film is where the rising conflict and stakes start to build. Although true to the movie's poetic and reflective style, this doesn't mean explosions or dramatic plot twists in the usual sense. Instead, the tension is emotional and philosophical, focusing on Damiel's internal struggle and the growing challenges that come with his desire to live as a human being. The film continues to balance the everyday life of Berlin with these metaphysical themes, blending the concrete with the abstract in a way that feels both intimate and universal. Damiel's growing feelings for Marion become the central thread here, but they are woven into a broader exploration of what it means to be alive, to feel pain, joy, and connection, things the angels have only ever witnessed from a distance. One of the most fascinating things about this second act is how it explores Damiel's slow but steady move toward humanity. We see him start to question his immortal existence and what it means to be forever detached from the people he watches over. There's a scene where he listens to the thoughts of a writer who laments the loneliness and fragility of human life, and Damiel's response is a kind of yearning that feels almost painful. It's not just about falling in love with Marion. It's about realizing that to truly live, to be human, you have to accept vulnerability and mortality. This adds a rich layer of complexity to the film because Daniel's desire isn't just romantic, it's existential. The stakes aren't just about whether he'll win Marion's heart. They're about whether he's willing to give up his angelic immortality and accept all the risks that come with being human. The film uses visual storytelling to show this rising conflict brilliantly. While the first act was mostly black and white, the second act begins to introduce more color, especially around Marion and the scenes where Daniel feels the pull of the human world. This gradual shift in color palette mirrors Daniel's growing emotional awakening and makes the movie's visual style feel like it's evolving alongside the story. The colors aren't loud or overwhelming. Instead, they appear gently, like the first warm rays of sunlight after a long winter. This technique creates a powerful contrast between the cold, timeless existence of the angels and the vibrant, messy life of humans. It's as if the film is saying that life, with all its imperfections and pain, is worth embracing because it's full of color and warmth. The character of Marion becomes even more central in this act, and the film takes time to explore her world in detail. Marion isn't just a love interest, she's a fully realized person with her own struggles and dreams. As a trapeze artist, she lives a life that's physically risky and emotionally demanding, constantly balancing on the edge, which makes her a perfect symbol for the fragility and beauty of human existence. The scenes showing Marion's rehearsals are filled with a kind of quiet determination and vulnerability that draw the audience in. There's a moment where she practices her trapeze act alone, and the camera lingers on her face, capturing a mixture of concentration, exhaustion, and hope. This focus on Marion's physical and emotional life helps deepen the stakes because it shows what Daniel would be leaving behind in his angelic state, an existence without the possibility of risk, pain, or passion. What's really interesting in this act is how Daniel's choice to become human begins to ripple outward, affecting his relationship with Cassiel, the other angel who remains detached and resigned to their immortal role. Cassiel serves as a kind of counterpoint to Daniel's awakening, embodying the path of eternal watcher who avoids involvement to escape pain. Their interactions highlight the core tension of the film, the choice between safety and risk, observation and participation. Cassiel's character adds depth to the narrative because he shows us what Daniel stands to lose if he gives up his angelic nature. Their conversations are philosophical without feeling heavy, touching on themes of loneliness, purpose, and the fear of change. For example, Cassiel warns Daniel about the cost of becoming human, emphasizing the angel's duty to remain detached, which makes Daniel's decision all the more poignant and courageous. It's a reminder that every choice carries consequences, especially when it comes to something as fundamental as existence itself. Alongside Daniel's personal journey, the film also raises the stakes by highlighting the political and social atmosphere of Berlin at the time. The city itself feels like it's on edge, divided by the wall and full of people trying to connect despite separation and isolation. This backdrop adds tension that isn't always explicit but is felt in the film's tone and setting. The wall isn't just a physical barrier. It symbolizes the emotional and existential walls that the characters, especially Damiel, must confront. The film uses this setting to remind viewers that the desire for connection and freedom isn't just personal, it's also political and social. Berlin in Wings of Desire becomes a character that reflects the struggles of the angels and humans alike, caught between division and the hope for unity. This contextual layer enriches the narrative, making Damiel's story feel part of a larger human experience. The second act also carefully builds suspense through smaller, quieter conflicts. For instance, there's tension in how Damiel begins to test the limits of his angelic powers, even though he knows crossing the line means losing his immortality. The film doesn't show this as a dramatic battle, but as moments of hesitation, small risks, and growing courage. One scene where Damiel physically interacts with the world, touching objects, feeling the rain on his skin, feels like a revelation. It's a simple act, but in the context of the story, it's huge. These moments capture the bittersweet nature of his choice, gaining the richness of human experience, but also accepting the pain that comes with it. This gradual escalation of stakes keeps the audience emotionally invested because we understand the magnitude of Damiel's decision, even if the film never spells it out in loud terms. The film also introduces a subplot involving a writer who wanders the city, symbolizing another form of human creativity and connection. His conversations and monologues about love, loss, and the meaning of art create a thematic echo of Damiel's journey. Through this character, the film explores how people try to make sense of their lives and leave a mark on the world, even though they are fragile and temporary. The writer's struggles remind us that every person's story matters, adding emotional weight to the film's meditation on life and existence. This subplot isn't just filler, it enriches the main narrative by offering different perspectives on the same themes, making the story feel more layered and universal. Another key aspect of the second act is the way the film deepens the theme of communication, or the lack of it. The angels hear the private thoughts of people but cannot respond or intervene, highlighting a profound sense of isolation. This is especially clear in the scenes where Damiel listens to people's inner voices but can't reach out to help them. His growing frustration and longing to break this barrier make the emotional stakes rise because we start to feel how painful it must be to witness suffering without being able to change it. This theme resonates with anyone who has ever felt helpless or disconnected, making the film feel deeply human despite its supernatural premise. It also sets up Damiel's eventual choice to cross from observer to participant as an act of rebellion against silence and invisibility. As the second act progresses, the narrative tension builds toward Damiel's final decision. The film carefully develops this moment, not through rushing or dramatic confrontations, but through quiet, intimate scenes that emphasize the emotional weight of the choice. Damiel's longing gaze at Marion, his hesitations, and the subtle shifts in the film's visual style all prepare the audience for the climax. The rising conflict here is less about external enemies and more about inner turmoil. Will Damiel surrender his angelic existence to become human with all the uncertainty and pain that entails? The way the film builds this tension through small moments and layered symbolism makes the stakes feel real and personal, inviting viewers to reflect on their own fears and desires about change and connection. Finally, the second act's rising conflict also brings a new energy to the film's poetic style. The voiceover narration becomes more urgent, the city feels more alive, and the angel's ethereal presence begins to fade as Daniel steps closer to humanity. The film uses music, lighting, and color shifts to mirror this transformation, creating a sensory experience that feels immersive and emotional. It's like watching a flower slowly bloom after a long winter. There's a sense of hope mixed with sadness, anticipation mixed with loss. This careful balancing act keeps the audience engaged, even though the story moves at a gentle pace. It's a reminder that conflict doesn't always have to be loud or violent. Sometimes the biggest battles happen inside the heart. In summary, the second act of Wings of Desire takes the film from quiet observation to emotional engagement, raising the stakes through Damiel's internal struggle and growing desire to be human. The rising conflict is subtle but powerful, built on themes of love, mortality, isolation, and connection. Through rich visual storytelling, thoughtful character development, and a deeply poetic narrative style, the film invites viewers to explore what it means to live fully, with all the beauty and pain that entails. It's a section of the movie that rewards close attention and emotional openness, making the audience root for Daniel's choice, even as they understand its cost. This act sets the stage perfectly for the final part of the story, where Daniel's decision will bring everything to a moving and unforgettable climax. When the film moves into its final act, the climax and resolution of Wings of Desire hit with a quiet but deeply emotional power that stays with you long after the credits roll. This act is where all the subtle buildups from earlier, Daniel's longing, his philosophical struggle, his love for Marion, come to a head. But instead of a big, loud confrontation or action-packed finale, the film delivers something much more intimate and poetic. The climax isn't about saving the world or fighting a villain. It's about a single choice that changes everything for one character. And in doing so, it speaks to universal ideas about love, sacrifice, and what it means to be alive. You might find yourself wondering, what's more powerful, eternal observation or the messy, painful reality of human life? The film invites us to sit with that question through the personal journey of Daniel. This final part feels like a quiet celebration of life's fragility and beauty wrapped into one. Daniel's decision to become human is the emotional heart of this act. Up until now, we've watched him as an invisible, immortal being, seeing the world through his eyes, but always separated from it. But here, the film shows him crossing the line, giving up his immortality, his angelic powers, and entering the realm of human senses and experiences. This transformation is portrayed with so much tenderness and care that you can almost feel the weight of his choice. There's no rush. The moment is slow and deliberate, allowing the audience to fully grasp what Daniel is giving up and gaining. One of the most striking scenes in this part is when Daniel experiences rain on his skin for the first time. The way the camera lingers on his face, the drops falling, his expression shifting from awe to a kind of peaceful acceptance, it captures the bittersweet essence of becoming human. It's a reminder that life's simplest moments, touch, taste, feeling, are often the most profound. What makes this climax so powerful is how it ties together the movie's themes of connection and isolation. Daniel's choice is motivated by his love for Marion, but it's also about breaking free from the loneliness of the angel's detached existence. The film uses this moment to show us that the very things that make human life difficult, pain, loss, uncertainty, are also what make it meaningful. Daniel chooses to step into that messiness, to be vulnerable and alive.